So I finished Mistborn, and if you've been watching this series, you'll know my plan was to read each part. There was 5 parts, and after each part, stop and talk about what I read and make some predictions. But I failed, and the reason I failed was because 2 reasons. Number one, the plot thickened, and it was so interesting and so exciting that I could not wait to do a video and then go back to reading it. I just wanted to read more. Plus, in fairness to me, the last part was only about 75 pages, so it felt justified, and now I can just talk about the entire book, and it was incredible. Before I move on any further though, I must make an apology to one of the characters, and that is Marsh. And I was so suspicious of Marsh for the duration of the book, and honestly, it was unfounded suspicion. I've got no idea why I was so suspicious of this character, and arguably he ends up being the MVP for our side and our heroes. So I humbly apologize, Marsh, and all Marsh fans, of which I now count myself one of you. I am ashamed. So what happens in the last couple of parts of this book? Well, the first thing I have to address is the Kelsiers Masterplan. And weirdly, it was quite obvious what he was doing with regards to building himself up as a god and building himself up to replace the Lord Ruler. And I thought that was obvious, but it's a testament to Sanderson that I myself, even though you could see what he was doing in a roundabout kind of way, like you could see he was trying to set himself up as the next godlike figure, I just didn't believe he was able to do it. And that's a testament to Sanderson because of how well he described the world and the helplessness of the Scar, and I kind of just went along with that. Like, we all believe, minus maybe Kelsier, throughout the duration of the book that the Lord Ruler cannot be beaten. And I basically fell into that sheep mindset because although you can see what Kelsier is doing, I just did not believe it. So bravo to Kelsier, bravo to the master plan, which he executed perfectly, and RIP to our hero. Is there a way he could come back? I don't know. I don't think there's anything laid out or anything that was foreshadowed to my knowledge. Maybe there was, meaning that he could come back, but it looks like it's RIP. And what an awesome character he was. Very flawed, very open with his flaws, but incredibly skilled. And the thing that we got, like the sign off, was him defeating Inquisitor the hard way. Marsh showed us the easier way on paper. You know, he did have to go through becoming an Inquisitor, but minus that bit, the easier way. So we saw Kelsier and we saw his mastery of pushing and pulling, and that scene was beautiful. The way Sanderson described it so crystal clear, I could see the battle, and it essentially took my breath away, his mastery of that part of Allomancy. So bravo, Kelsier, bravo. Then the other big reveal is obviously the Lord Ruler himself, and I'm actually very sad that the Lord Ruler's gone, not because I liked him, but because there are so many secrets that were probably held by that man, by that terrace. And the fact that he was Rashek, I guessed before we got to that moment, because of how obsessed the person, the hero of ages writing the logbook was about Rashek. He was really obsessed by the end in every single journal entry, and I started to think, oh, it'd be quite cool if it turns out it was Rashek who became, you know, the Lord Ruler. But I wasn't convinced. And then when it cut off before he went into the cave, that's when I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. And then some of the guesses that I had based around the ability and what I thought Atium was, which was wrong, and what I thought the Deepness was, which I think is wrong as well. I thought was like they'd put the Deepness into a metal, the Lord Ruler had, and to be able to do that, he had to be a terrace. So I had guessed the Rashek thing, but it didn't make it any less exciting that I was right and that was correct. It was a really cool twist, and I didn't manage to figure it out until maybe a chapter or 2 before the end anyway. And we get so many great reveals, but the most thought-provoking reveal, well, there was a lot, but some of the most thought-provoking reveals was the fact that the Lord Ruler was an allomancer and also a ferrochemist and used ferrochemy. And the idea that you could use both of those at the same time. And what we also discover is that the Well of Ascension, really cool name, there isn't any records of allomancy before the Well of Ascension? And this just opens up so many questions, and I feel like I finished this book with more questions than I started. And when I started, I didn't know anything, so it's weird that that would be the case, but is well done, Brandon Sanderson, for giving me a full book, like it is an encapsulated story, but also opening a million questions for me afterwards and keeping me very hungry to be a part of this world. That's really impressive that someone can do both at the same time. Normally there'll be a couple of loose ends, but this has me very much excited to figure out what is left to come, because there are so many questions left over. So what are those questions? I'm going to go through them, and then I'm also going to go through what I predict is going to be the answers to those questions in the later books in this series and the wider Cosmere universe as well. So here come the predictions. The biggest question for me is the deepness. Like, what is the deepness? And it really wasn't even touched on at the end of the book. And here are my thoughts. So what I predicted previously, and I stand by this, is the idea that the deepness was somehow put into a metal. Because the deepness is what Rashek, or the Hero of Ages, they were both traveling towards. Obviously, Rashek maybe kills the Hero of Ages. We don't know that for certain, though. We just know he doesn't write again in the logbook, but most likely kills him. And the deepness disappears. And when the deepness disappears, the mists appear, it would seem, and also the ash, and also those are tied to allomancy. So allomancy appears during that period of time. So it feels like the deepness or allomancy, you can't really have both at the same time on paper. So I stand by the idea that somehow the Terrace, Rashek, the Lord Ruler, managed to put the deepness away. And just before he dies, as is drawn attention to in the book a lot, he says something along the lines of, you don't know what I do for this world. You don't know what I'm doing for this world. So I believe he's constantly battling the deepness, or putting it away, or containing it. And that would again lean towards it being contained and put somewhere. So I think that the deepness is somewhere in a metal and he fights it on a daily basis. That's my guess for the deepness. And I think it's quite clear that the Lord Ruler, whenever he was going past, when he soothed people, it wasn't just soothing their emotions and making them feel a bit down. It was like a really detailed description of morbid and crippling depression. And that's the same descriptions we got from the Hero of Ages in the logbook about the deepness before. They were so similar that I think that when they pick up his bracelets that he was sticking in his arm, the Lord Rulers, when they find those eventually, maybe they're going to find the deepness in there, and he's doing some kind of endless battle against it to keep it from the world. Something along those lines. So speaking of metals, we also find out that the 11th metal the Kelsier had actually is paired with gold. And this metal allows you to see what somebody else would have been if they made different choices, the opposite of gold. So that means that Atium has a paired metal to it, and we don't know what that metal does. So it got me thinking of what that metal could do when we do find it. And the conclusion I came to is, what Atium does is it allows you to see what the person might be about to do or will be about to do, especially when you're fighting, like physically. What if the pairing of Atium allowed you to see what somebody has done? And my thinking for that is, it's quite logical, like that would kind of be the opposite of what Atium does. But also it was said the Lord Ruler can see when someone's lying. So if he had figured out this, I suppose, 12th metal, the opposite of Atium, the alloy of it, maybe the reason he can see if you're lying, maybe that wasn't a myth, is because he would burn that and look at what you have done previously. So there's no way for you to lie to him. So that would be my guess on what that metal does. But we also kind of sneakily just go over, without really addressing, Vin is given a metal by one of the Inquisitors to eat. And then when she burns it, it gets rid of all of the other metals inside of her. So if there was no allomancy before the deepness, based on the information I have so far, then the deepness would be able to get rid of allomancy. So if the deepness is stored in a metal, right, and then a little bit would be like chipped off and given to someone, it would kind of make sense that the deepness nullifies allomancy. So maybe the deepness was stored in the metal, a little bit of metal was chipped off, they used that to nullify the allomantic powers inside of Mistborns while they do their stuff. And that would kind of make sense. But I feel like there would be like a bigger reaction if you swallowed some of the deepness and burnt it. That's the only thing holding back that theory. But I assume throughout the course of the entirety of this world, there are more metals and more magic systems. So I hope I'm at least like a little bit right or in the right direction. But you never know. There's so much. And it's coming from someone's brain, so you never know. It might not even make logical sense. But Brandon Sanderson is quite a logical guy. So I feel like, hopefully, I'm in the right direction with some of these guesses. So what comes next? Well, obviously, we need to stabilize this world. It's just had the head chopped off of the snake. We need to get the nobles back on board. Obviously, Ellen's father is still out there, out and about with quite a lot of power. The people running the plantations going to have a lot of power. The rest of the Inquisitors who are out and about, potentially up to 13 of them, we think. There's Kandra out there, there's Terrace to be found. There's so much going on that this world is going to be really exciting moving forwards. The thing I'm most excited to find out about is the Deepness, the Well of Ascension, and all of that. And I had a thought based on the Well of Ascension, and where it was also alluded to that potentially Vin is now the hero of ages. So, if Vin is actually the hero of ages, and whatever was supposed to properly happen at the Well of Ascension, if that was really waiting for the hero of ages, and it would appear the hero of ages never made it the first time because Rashek killed them, we don't know that, but that's what I'm guessing, then obviously Vin has to go to the Well of Ascension, and maybe she will be granted Feruchemy to balance out the world, or maybe there's something else that she's supposed to be granted and a different way to deal with the Deepness. Maybe the Lord Ruler just utilized both of his abilities to make like a stopgap and a containment on the Deepness, when really, if Vin goes, she will be granted the actual powers and the actual abilities that their first hero of ages was supposed to get. Oh, there's so much. And because I know the next book is called The Well of Ascension, I know I will at least get some of those answers, and hopefully we'll get a lot more insight into what happened with Rashek and the original hero of ages, because that is such an interesting period of time. Even learning how Rashek did what he did and conquered the world and set that up and defeated the Deepness, like, I'm hungry for that information as well. So the fact the next book is called The Well of Ascension just tells me I'm going to get some answers. So what are my overall thoughts on Mistborn, the first book? I think that Brandon Sanderson, this isn't my first Brandon Sanderson. I read The Wheel of Time, and obviously he finishes that series, but it's really difficult to judge somebody based on him finishing someone else's work. So this was more of his, obviously I say more, this was completely written by him. So my overall thoughts is that he's clear, he's concise, he's to the point, he's relatively blunt, and it was a very enjoyable read. Like, I've had an awesome time reading this book. Is his style my favorite? Probably not. He doesn't transport me the same way other readers do. But what he does do, and somebody put this in the comments, and I'm going to steal it because it was such an incredible comment. Brandon Sanderson essentially gives you the scene very clear. You can see it as if directly through a window. There's no perspective. So normally you're not getting it from the perspective of one of the characters. It isn't tainted that hard by their perspective and what they grew up like. He doesn't do it that way. So it wouldn't be like the evil person or the good person or one character or the other's perspective tainting the scene. And it isn't even really Brandon Sanderson's perspective on the matter tainting the scene, which is strange because he invented it all in his head, right? So it's all his perspective. But what my point is that he gives you such a clear and crystalline look at what's happening that he basically just lays out the facts and allows you to make the interpretations from there. Whereas some of my other favorite authors, they will heavily influence how you see things, and not only until you read it back or you think back on it, you realize, maybe something different happened than what I thought happened in that scene, because they're so heavily influencing it themselves. I'm not sure if I'm explaining this well, but I just really appreciate Brandon Sanderson's clearness, his conciseness, and his almost unbiasedness to his own characters in his own story. He really just doesn't even paint a picture. He just builds a window into the story, allows you to see it and bring your own conclusions to it as well. I'm not sure I even made a point just there. I might watch that back and it'll be a whole load of nothing, but I can't. Hopefully that made a lot of sense. You let me know. What do you think of Brandon Sanderson's writing? I did enjoy it. He's not my favorite author in the world yet, but I did really enjoy it. And the best part is, this is just the beginning. Obviously, there's a really wide universe in the Cosmere, but what I am going to do is I am going to jump right into the rest of this series, the Mistborn series. I have one book to read before that, which is Murtar by Christopher Paolini. My inner child will not allow me to skip over that again. I'm going to have to read that next. But after that, I'm coming straight back to Mistborn, and I'll be making more videos on that. If you've enjoyed this, I have also done this for the Wheel of Time and for the First Law, which is Joe Abercrombie's series as well. So I'd love to have you join me there. If you've enjoyed it, please like and subscribe, and you have an amazing day.